Now, Eskom's declining electricity available factor is a cause for serious concern. That's the view of the Association of Municipal Electricity Utilities Strategic Advisor, Vally Padayachee. He's now calling on government to declare an energy emergency to allow Eskom and municipalities to cut through red tape and get electrons onto the power grid as quickly as possible. He joins me now to tell us more about some of his recommendations. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Padayachee. You know, when you said they should declare an energy crisis, I just thought, well, we're already in an energy crisis right now. So what more should they be doing by calling it that?
Good afternoon and a happy Mandela Day to you and your viewers. Let me give context to why we are requesting an emergency to be declared, and to take a step back. This crisis situation needs, as an urgency, at a high level, 6,000 megawatts to be generated or to be acquired almost immediately onto the national grid. And that's been made public by Eskom and by other key stakeholders. Right? So now, given the nature of the business, the generation business, the power sector, you cannot acquire those electrons easily. It takes time, effort, and so on. And that time and effort, we're saying, will take about 2 years, right? So, but notwithstanding that, the municipalities and Eskom, who own the national grid, need to acquire those electrons urgently onto the grid. Now, besides the technical aspects and all of that, which we can address to a certain extent, and I'll talk about it just now, there are a number of legislative, regulatory, and what I call administrative hurdles that need to be unlocked, debottlenecked. And that can only be done by government. And given the current processes and experiences, that takes long, forever. So what we're saying is that in this crisis situation, we need an emergency to empower whoever that may be in government, the relevant ministers, and of course the president, to take such action. So that's why we're calling for an emergency, amongst other reasons.
Yeah, and so you also make 28 recommendations. Just tell us some of the few recommendations that you have, because we have spoken, for instance, on this channel with the former CEO of Eskom, and he says actually Eskom does have capacity to sort out our electricity crisis in South Africa. He even goes on to say that IPPs are not the solution.
Yeah, I think we must be very careful that, and I'm not negating what the Eskom CEO is saying. The 6,000 megawatts that I'm referring to can come from various technologies, right? So definitely renewables, battery storage, and of course from the existing technologies, which we call synchronous power, dispatchable load, vis-a-vis coal-fired, gas, hydro, and so on. Now, as I mentioned to you, we cannot, in fact, there's a huge risk of getting these 6,000 megawatts in this critical 2-year period, I would argue, right? If you can get it, definitely, yes, even affordable storage. But I'm of the opinion, from my experience, that there's a huge risk. So given that situation, we still need to get all the electrons, even squeeze out all the electrons from the existing limping Eskom power stations. I don't say all are limping. Of the 15, I would say 9 are poorly performing, 6 are still okay. So in this 2 years, notwithstanding what other stakeholders are saying, we need to, as best as possible, get the electrons from these limping old power stations. And that is indicative by increasing the energy availability factor, which is now sitting at about less than 60%. I think it's about 55, 58%. We need to up it, right? We need to put in all the measures that I've described in my grand plan, the Carpe copper electron grand plan to make it happen. And do you want me to just talk about further on some of the other initiatives which may not be that public knowledge?
Just let me know what you think, Mr. Padayachee, about the talks which now have been, we've been told was a joke between the Minister of Mineral Resources, Vally Padayachee, as well as President Cyril Ramaphosa, saying last week at the SACP conference that they're thinking of an Eskom 2.0. What are your thoughts around that?
Let me, I don't want to get into that debate between the president and the minister. But let me talk.
Well, they're not debating. They seem to be in agreement that we need another parastatal that will support Eskom. But I think a lot of South Africans are thinking, well, you know, there was a lot of corruption that contributed to us facing the crisis we have now. And what would another parastatal really do?
No, definitely. I think it's been proven that government cannot run what we call private sector businesses, what you call going forward, and that's based on experience. So what we're saying is that if there's a second power company to be established, and if government deems that necessary from their planning purposes, then that should be run in the main by the private sector. Government must have an input into that business because it must take care of all the wider communities, the poor communities. Otherwise, big business will run with it. But let me just make one point on that from a technical perspective. What the minister has said is that by creating a second power company, it will accelerate baseload, dispatchable power. Now, as a technocrat, as an energy engineer, consultant, I would support that. In other words, if we can accelerate baseload power in the context of what I've described, the 6,000 megawatts in the next 2 years and going forward, why not, right? And at the same time, in parallel, bring in all what we call the other technologies, storage also. But baseload in any power business globally is a definite necessity to keep the lights burning.
All right. Thank you very much for your time here on All Angles, Mr. Padayachee. That was the Association of Municipal Electricity Utility Strategic Advisor, Vally Padayachee, speaking to us there.